And good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Northland Sports Page. It's Brian Prudhomme. It's Dave Cook. It is Saturday. Happy Saturday morning, everybody. We'll be here with you until it's not morning anymore. We'll be here until noon. We're Minnesota sports fans, though, so there might be a little bit of morning involved, spelled a little differently. Dave Cook, good morning to you.
How are you? Here I
Doing
thought
well.
when you said good morning, I almost said you too. But then I remembered we're on the air.
I didn't ask what's your favorite band.
Right. I was like, oh my gosh, Brian's saying good morning really loud to me this morning.
Yes,
But it was to everybody else.
I'm doing my traditional Robin Williams bit, and yes, it can be intended for you. I think that'd be great if Saturday mornings when you pick me up for the show, if that's how I got in your car.
Can you imagine? The neighbors would start to look, good morning.
Well, and I also think you would. Like, would you knock that off? Because I've seen sometimes when we start the day, as in getting ready to come here, the energy level isn't always the same as it is when we hit the air itself.
Oh, 100%. That's 100% true. But after last night, with the football that we got to do and the scores that we got to see and Packer weekend and then the crazy trade last night, energy level's high today.
There is more than a little bit to discuss. Let's put it that way.
Yes, there is. And, I mean, here we go again. And forgetting that the Lynx might be, they're certainly top four because they're in that spot.
They might be headed for another title.
Yes.
It is going to be interesting because Minnesota sports, we don't know a lot about winning championships, but the Minnesota Lynx are the exception. They're well on their way.
They are. And we're going to start today off by talking about, the coaches and where they line up, right, as far as our professional coaches. And we forget all the time about Cheryl, and we're not going to forget about her today.
I'll tell you what was unforgettable as well. That was listening to you guys last night because you had Hermantown Rock Ridge. We know Mike Zagelmeyer's listening. It's a happy Saturday for him as well.
You know it is, and he had his team did so many good things last night against a really physical Rock Ridge team. Rock Ridge had both hands tied behind their back because their quarterback was hurt and they were running their star running back at quarterback, right? So it really limited what their offense could do. But Zag's offense was good last night. They had, the thunder and lightning thing go. Celine was fantastic running the ball. He was fantastic running the ball last night. And, Shots the type of quarterback you need to have to win with.
Right.
So his passes he was not perfect throwing last night, but he never stopped throwing. And so his receivers made really nice plays on the ball. His safeties, that safety combination that he has might be the best that we've seen in a while. Like, Hermantown looked really good against a strong team. Rock Ridge had no offense because their quarterback was hurt. But they're big, they're physical, they tackle well, all the things you're supposed to do. And Hermantown flexed last night a little.
Absolutely. Hermantown wins big. Grand Rapids wins big. Cloquet wins big. North Branch wins big.
That's
and
the biggest surprise.
There you have the 7-4A rundown as far as last night goes. North Branch has won that section the last 2 years. Right now, they're tapping everybody on the head and saying, we're here again. Now, granted, Hermantown lost on essentially a final play, but they hit Denfeld like a truck last night.
They did, and you and I had seen them. And again, when we watch a team, we don't know really how good the other team was. Because, they beat the devil out of East, but East didn't do anything to hurt themselves, right? They just weren't as good. But when a team plays good fundamental football and gets wrecked like Denfeld did, you're like, how good is Denfeld? And then Denfeld goes down with their skill players and how the high-flying act they ran against East.
And C.J. Hammond attendance in North Branch, if you need extra motivation, which they shouldn't have.
And just got wrecked.
So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. I think the interesting part is there's only 3 weeks left in the season, at least game-wise, because you've got October the 4th, next Friday. We'll be in Hermantown again. I'll be back with you. It'll be Duluth East visiting the Hawks. October 11th, another Friday for most teams. Now, granted, these aren't set in stone for everybody because officiating shortages have moved games.
Yep.
But then you're looking at MEA week in just a couple of weeks, 2.5 weeks, basically.
So I have a question for you, and we just talked about this before the show. Denfeld got embarrassed, right? Who is going to pay the price? Like, are they going to put 50 up against the next team? Are they going to hold
if you're
their
Eric
water?
Lofald, you hope it's Cloquet because that's your next on your schedule.
Right. But I wonder if they're going to try to hold their water for Hermantown and show the Hawks. But that's too far in the future. Like they need to go the next 2 weeks. And like we said, if they win against Cloquet, if they win against Cloquet, start. Second of all, if they win in Cloquet by a touchdown or two, you wonder if that loss is in their head. If they blow Cloquet away, right? Let's just say they do.
Then they got angry.
Right. Then they got angry, but will they have any of that left in the pot
Well,
for Hermantown?
I think you're looking too far ahead in general because there's a game in between
because I'm not
Cloquet and
coaching.
Hermantown. So I know coaches are listening, but don't listen to that because if you have your team steal that mentality, you're in a world of hurt.
And what does Vency always say? I don't play
fanball. Play football.
This is fanball right now.
So it was good to listen to you and Tim Roweeder do some football on these airwaves last night. I'll tell you what, speaking of Tim's, it was an interesting night because I got home from doing public address at Duluth East and I was listening to Tim Roweeder. So he was the first Tim on my mind. And then I went home and I watched the Minnesota Twins. So that put Tim Conway on my mind because I wondered if Dorf could hit the baseball better than the Minnesota Twins had been. But then probably less than an hour later, it was Tim Connolly on my mind because holy cow, the Minnesota Timberwolves shaking up their roster, potentially shaking up the future of the franchise, but potentially in a good way. We'll see.
Well, did shake up the future of the franchise. Like, you know, and the thing
or
about,
did it solidify it because the young stars will still be there?
Yeah, they shook it up, but it could be for the better. The thing about Cat, and we need to look back, and it'll be fun to talk to Rick about this in a minute or in an hour. The thing about Cat is he was a proud Minnesota Timberwolf. He never asked to leave. He was Flip's last guy. He was a consummate professional. Now, there's all kinds of stuff that irritated us about Cat, right? But Minnesota fans love players who love to be here and never forget that Cat loved to be here.
Through it all, stuck out a lot of bad.
All of it. So we can't say, yay, Cat's gone. He wanted to go the whole time because he never asked to go.
Yeah, I don't think it's good riddance, but it's, well, we've talked about this forever. It was bleep or get off the pot, and they finally did.
And they did before he turned 30, right? And that's where apparently NBA players fall off the cliff.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about local sports, kicking off with the high school football scores. Yes, I use kicking off for a reason.
Oh, nice.
But we will talk about a lot today. I know there's a lot of topics to cover. We'll get to as much of it as we can. We'll give you a little bit of a rundown. We're going to talk some coaches here in segment one as the opening topic, kind of the state of the union for coaches in Minnesota in terms of professional sports. We'll talk to Dave Hoops about 10:30, play buy or sell about 10:50. Then the 11 o'clock hour, that is guest loaded. And if you want to have some fun with it, it's almost like Larry, Moe, and Curly. I've got Nick, Rick, and Vency.
Daryl, my other brother, Daryl.
That's correct, because we'll have Nick Nelson from Twins Daily. We will eulogize what was certainly a Twins funeral that lasted about a month in reality. Oh, yeah. One of the worst collapses you'll ever see in sports. And where do they go from here, if anywhere? And then Rick Rickard, like I said, it's always good to be friends with a guy who's readily available for you because he's become our NBA insider as a former Timberwolves pick. And I sent the screenshots of the transaction last night, and I said, did you see this? And he kind of said, saw it? What time do you need me? So 11:25 will be the answer to that.
Hey, can I tie two things together here real quick? And I know he's not a professional.
Is it your shoes?
No, I don't wear tie shoes.
Just check them, yeah.
I'm an old man. I wear slip-ons.
Velcro? Okay, yes. Good.
Anyways, so the one coach we won't talk about because it's not a professional is PJ Fleck. You know where PJ Fleck should have been yesterday or one of his recruiters? Hermantown. Because Hermantown doesn't play for 6 points. They play for 7. Medill was ridiculous last night.
But the one position they don't need currently, although game one would tell you differently, would be kicker.
Right. So he's not going to bring the high school senior in. Let's bring him in next year because he's nails. Like, I don't know how far, what his distance is, but the team is walking off with the ball still in the air because it's good. It's a different mindset. So Rockridge goes down and scores, and you're hoping for 2. Hermantown goes down and scores and expect 7, right?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to be expecting from the Gophers. If it comes down to their kicker in any way, they outperformed expectations that I have today. I have a feeling in the big house it might be a big embarrassment, but I'll tell you this. I would love to be wrong. And speaking of being wrong, I kept faith for the Minnesota Twins for a long time. And when people panicked a month ago, I said, I think you're pushing too far. And there were a lot of people that said, this team's not making the playoffs about a month ago. And congratulations, you were right, I was wrong. I'm okay to admit it. And if you want to stick it to me for that, go ahead. But I also think that there are some fans, heavy on the air quotes, who would prefer to be right than to have this team have success. And I don't think that I'm that way because, spoiler alert, when it comes to Packer Week or the Vikings, which I never thought that would be down the priority list, but here we are because of the week that was, I would love to be surprised tomorrow. Am I confident? No. Am I excited? Sure. But again, being right, if you say something negative about a Minnesota team and you call yourself a fan, Why are you puffing your chest out? That's not a good thing.
Nope. But Dad always said, I'd rather an optimist can never be pleasantly surprised.
I understand the mindset, but if he said something negative and turned out to be right, did he walk around about how smart he was? I would hope if he's a fan, he walked around disappointed.
His head was down, and he would say, "I told you, I told you." Not bragging, just
right.
Complaining.
The disappointed of sometimes I hate being right.
But that's how
that's more
presented.
The mindset.
Yep.
So who's right, who's wrong about the state of coaches in Minnesota? That's how we're going to attack the opening topic today. But before we open anything, we couldn't even open the show if not for our great sponsors.
Absolutely. And let's start with the original, the OG, Arola Architecture Studio, Hoops Brewing, ABS Auto Solutions, Stewart's Bike Sports and Trophies, Comfort Systems of Duluth, Advantage Emblem and Screen Printing, Kohler Toyota, Kohler Hyundai, Mike Regan at Christensen Group Insurance, Assisted Living Locators. That's www.assistedlivinglocators.org/Duluth. One of my mom's cousins is coming into town this week, and so is her son. And we're going to get to talk about, what in the world should they do now with his mom. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to hop on Assisted Living Locators because as adults with parents who, always made those kind of decisions,
right.
We don't know. So assistedlivinglocators.org/Duluth, we are going to have a website visit this week. Kraus Heating and Cooling, your Carrier HVAC authorized dealer. Mount Royal Bottle Shop, Ferguson Bath and Kitchen, and the Blackwoods Group, including their locations on London Road, Tavern on the Hill, up on the hill, in Two Harbors, and in Proctor. I spent money there, by the way, this week.
Attaboy. Always good to support our sponsors. They support us. We're forever grateful. They're an absolute victory, no matter how many wins or losses our favorite teams get. And how much of that are the coaches responsible for? We are going to eventually talk about that right now.
Okay, never mind. I was going to talk about the food we got. We'll do it next time.
Sounds good. All right, which coach would you like to start with? I just didn't want to go 20 more minutes not getting to anything.
No, I got you. Let's talk about the one who has a chance to win the whole shooting match right now, and let's set the bar high.
So Cheryl Reeve kicks it off because she is the championship pedigree that Minnesota has. And we're going to talk about pros and cons of each coach. Let's start with the cons because for her, I think the list is very short. Sometimes the only con that I can think of is she's become a little bit get off my lawn with the revolutionizing of the game. And if she doesn't have a proven superstar that's been around for a while, she can struggle a little bit.
That's my point. My point is when she doesn't have a top 2 player in the NBA, she's fair to Midland. But you know who else is that? Everybody else.
So has she basically become the Phil Jackson of the WNBA? Yes. Because stars tend to want to play for you, and when they do, they reach a whole other level. But what would you be like if you didn't have stars might be the only question that those on the outside are asking. I'm not asking it as a naysayer of Cheryl Reeve. I'm far from it, but I have to wonder if others think that.
Well, I think so, and I like Cheryl too. Like this is a nitpick. It's still her weakness. That doesn't mean it's not like its tiny little weakness. But Maya Moore's a top 5 player all time in the WNBA, and we just had Collier go off with a game for the ages.
Right.
And that team is good because of the superstar.
But here's my question. And with Maya Moore, maybe it's a little bit different because you can say, well, Gino Auriemma made her a superstar. Gino Auriemma does that with almost everybody. You look at who's who in the WNBA, and they almost all came from him.
Yep.
But if you look at Maya, whose years basically were Minnesota, and you look at Napheesa Collier, whose game is at another level, basically in Minnesota. So is it necessarily true that Cheryl can't win without superstars because isn't she at least partly responsible for creating them?
Oh, of course. But then you have to look at when they didn't have that dog. They're just another basketball team, right? So she can create. Right. Maybe they have to come in really good and she can take them to a whole nother level.
Because outside of the 2 players we just mentioned, you could make that argument for the others. They traded for Sylvia Fowles, so she was a star elsewhere. They traded for Lindsay Whalen. She was a star elsewhere. They traded for Simone Augustus. She was a star elsewhere.
Jenna McCarville.
Right. So you've had different stars in different places end up here. Yeah. But in the current state of things, and especially with Maya, I feel like Cheryl is maybe better at player development than what we're stating.
Yeah, I think she's really good at taking excellent or great at making them that next step. But we really haven't seen, somebody who was drafted at the end of the first round become more than what we thought they were going to be.
Right. But then the other piece to the equation is, if you look at pros, she is that good with superstars. I mean, you think about there is only one basketball, and there are too many egos, and how are you going to get this done? Well, she had some of the best teams ever. We just named Maya, Lindsay, Fowles, and Augustus. Yeah. I mean, that's 4 of them, and that was otherworldly. She coaches this Olympic team that just doesn't lose a game. Now, you can decide whether or not that's an indictment on other countries or not, but she gets that done. To me, and I think some people would argue this, she's a tremendous ambassador for women's sports and the WNBA. Now, I think the argument would be, well, is she really? Because so much of a new brand of fan is present in the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark. And I think there's at least a vibe, not saying this is true, but there's at least a vibe that Caitlin Clark and Cheryl Reeve don't mix tremendously well. But I think Cheryl's beef is mine. I think it's the fact that these new fans are new Caitlin Clark fans coming in saying, I love the WNBA. And you want to look at them and go, name 3 other players.
Yeah.
And they can't.
Yep.
And put some respect on the team that's been the gold standard.
And now, though, the goal is that they can name 3 other players.
Right.
Right.
Which I'm all for. Grow the game.
Yep. No, but the thing about this is we know from watching other coaches and other superstars that coaching superstars is not easy.
Right.
And Cheryl Reeve
Think
does
of
that
Del
as-
Harris.
Yeah.
I brought up Phil Jackson. Think of Del Harris, who had pretty much similar Laker teams and did nothing.
Cheryl Reeve can coach superstars, and that's the hardest thing to do in the NBA, WNBA. Oh, NBA too.
Well, and I think she gets the tough love to work well. Now, granted, I'm not on the inside, so I don't know how much of a player's coach she is or, how hard on players she might be in practice, but she seems kind of tough as nails, but she seems to get players to have that resonate for them.
Yep.
You don't want to say Bobby Knight because that's not fair, but you know what I mean? There are some players that went, I can't play for that, but the ones that did really well.
Yeah, it seems to me that she's tough as a coach, but she is wonderful with them off the court. Like, she is all into whatever it is they're doing, which makes a big difference. She cares about them as people.
So I think if we graded this coach, I think at worst you give her an A to an A minus because, she's got championships galore and their bad years have still actually been good or at worst mediocre.
Yeah.
And when you're finishing around 500 and you're going, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with that team? That just gives you the idea of the bar you've set.
Yep, 100% agree. When they're mediocre, it's bad. When the Wild are mediocre, we celebrate.
So I don't know if this is, I know we're grading coaches as a choice today, but I don't know if we're doing this rank-wise, but the way we've started, this is my favorite coach in Minnesota.
She's number one.
Yes. And Dave Cook is eventually going to get his mic back. Somehow that levitated away from you. They just said, you're done. I didn't like where that thought was going. You're done.
The microphone does not
It's not Halloween yet, but there's a ghost in the studio.
The microphone does not like the idea that Cheryl Reeve
You've done some silly things in show history, but that was not on you.
That was not on me. All right, so let's bounce. Let's go to the next coach we should talk about. And I think we should talk about the current flavor of the day, and that's Kevin O'Connell.
So Kevin O'Connell is absolutely the flavor of the day, and he's been up and down like a roller coaster, at least in terms of record, because that first season he came in and blew the doors off, seemed to get Kirk Cousins to another level. The ultimate player's coach, it appears. Breath of fresh air, maybe as much his personality as it was a departure from the previous one, because Mike Zimmer's culture, to say it got stale is being kind.
Yeah, his culture was the kind in a petri dish at the end.
Right. So I think Kevin O'Connell is very well liked, and some of that is well deserved, but only some of it, because he's not without a few warts here and there.
Agreed. I agree 100%. I think that he gets emotionally attached to certain players.
Right.
And I know all coaches do that, but that it can be a weakness. I don't know if he can. We haven't seen him do 2 things. 1, have a player that he loves really not play well. And 2, how do you handle a bad season? Now, you can say they haven't had a bad season because him as a coach made Josh Dobbs look like a superstar.
I was going to say they did have a bad season, but it was littered with excuses built in when you got to start 4 quarterbacks in a year.
Yep, and he made that work to a 500 record.
Yes.
So anyways, I think, however, that my issue with him, and honestly, I am nitpicking, right? Because I'm really impressed with him. He's an offensive coordinator.
Correct.
He has the keys to the building, but he's an offensive coordinator. We don't know how he handles the defense guys. And so as a head coach, this is the nitpick. We're not really sure. As the offense coordinator, he's an A plus. Now he's smart enough to have an A plus defensive coordinator, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't love to talk politics because sports and politics cross over enough, and I always get a little sketchy when it comes to that. But we always talk about a good president has a really good cabinet. Surround yourself with really smart people. Kevin O'Connell's been genius that way because maybe he has no idea how to handle defensive staff, defensive personnel. People talk like Brian Flores is the head coach of this team.
100%. And that's another plus for O'Connell. He doesn't push back on that. Here's the thing, and remember this. There's no salary cap on coaches. So Brian Flores is, whatever with the lawsuit, the NFL has kind of turned their back on him. You know what, Minnesota? Back the Brinks truck up.
Right.
Who cares? Like, pay O'Connell $25 more than Flores is getting because he's the head coach, right? But Flores should be the highest paid assistant in the NFL. Like, make it so Flores can say, oh, yeah, well, I'll show the rest of you guys, and I'm just going to dream up every defense you've never seen.
Right.
And we love it here in Minnesota because Minnesota loves him.
And I think Minnesota loves O'Connell as well. To get back to him in terms of pluses and minuses, I think the thing for me that's kind of baffling, but at the same time it just kind of makes you smirk, is I think his positives and his negatives are sometimes the same. Because you look at the different motions and the window dressings and the things that he does offensively, and he gets defenses to set up exactly how he wants them to, and he gets the look that he wants. How many times you hear him say that? And pre-snap, everything looks great, and maybe after the snap it goes well, maybe it doesn't. He does seem to be a pretty good play caller. He does seem to have an offensive game plan without a doubt. However, he's got a little bit of Brad Childress to him, and some people might hear that and go, what do you mean? Brad Childress proclaimed that he had a kick-ass offense, but then was always trying to trick you. Well, everybody's expecting me to do this, so I'm going to do this just because. Other times, just the expected play is good enough. You look at the halfback option pass against San Francisco that thankfully didn't happen. But let's say it did. If it works, he's a genius. If it doesn't, why are we calling that, trying to milk the clock with 2+ minutes to go, up by a score, looking to make it 2? You look at that Cincinnati game last year that I won't let go. Why are we tush pushing twice in a row? Okay, if we're going to do it, why are we doing it with Brandon Powell, who basically in football terms has the same strength level I do? Wrong BP on the tush push.
Right, that's 100% true.
I just think he outfoxes himself at times.
But so at the end of the day, here's the thing: he has made sunshine out of shinola.
Yes,
right?
That's the FCC friendly way of saying that.
It is.
Yep.
The team that he inherited with Kirk Cousins wasn't going anywhere, right? And he did make Kirk Cousins a better quarterback, and they won. Last year was like a race car that the engine broke down about halfway,
right?
And he was the guy with some bale wire, spit, and chewing gum that got the car across the finish line.
Well, I think Kevin O'Connell's other problem with Josh Dobbs last year was when he didn't really want to teach him anything to keep it simple, everything went well. And then Josh Dobbs had time to get more invested into the system. And then there was too much for his brain to handle, and it just kind of went out the window. There was no more backyard improvisation. It was, this is what we do, and Josh Dobbs couldn't do it.
Not his style, yeah.
But the thing for Kevin O'Connell that I like the most is no matter who the personnel is, the players seem to buy in. They believe in what he's doing. You look at player for player, this Vikings roster is okay to pretty good. They believe they can do anything. There are teams that have a lot better rosters than this, #Dallas Cowboys, that can't do much.
So my final question on O'Connell is this. So the Vikings Entertainment Network packages his post-game speeches as well as anything I've ever seen.
Yes.
We never see anything if it doesn't go perfect.
Unless you watch Receiver on Netflix, because there's after the loss to Philly, Kevin going off.
Right. So you wonder how much of what we see with O'Connell is packaged for us and how much of it's real. Now, the only reason I say that is because it's only been a couple of years, right?
And the other thing, I think you made a good point. Obviously, B-Flow runs the defense. And again, if you listen to enough national news, you'd think Brian Flores is the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. But I guess one, I won't call it a red flag, but it's at least pink, is that Kevin O'Connell's the QB whisperer. I get that. Haven't really heard him talk about any other position in depth. I don't care if it's offensive or defensive. Reminds me a little bit about when Mike Zimmer cared about the defensive guys and just let the offensive guys kind of out to rot.
Yep, I think that's exactly what it is. The difference is that Zim fired Norm right away.
But you're not hearing of turmoil. You're not hearing of culture issues. Everybody who is in Viking purple seems very happy to be in Viking purple. Yep. I'm going to give Kevin O'Connell a B+.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's exactly about where it sits. And if they make a run with Sam Darnold, we reserve the right to increase that, right?
All right, we got to move along time-wise, so I want to get the easy one out of the way because John Hines, you get an incomplete.
Right, absolutely.
If it's Topher Davis and I doing this show, you get an A+ because we just decided, and it's a bit, that John Hines is Jack Adams going by a different name.
Yeah.
So far, we know nothing. How long are you going to be here? I hope it's longer than this season because I think Bill Guerin has given you this job, and I hope it's not just a Band-Aid, and we'll see. But we know nothing about this guy, and we might not know anything after this 82-game season because this is the one season left of, well, we're basically going to take the checkbook away and see how you do. So with that, speaking of taking a checkbook away and see how you do, let's go to Rocco Baldelli next.
Man, I'm going to ask Nick this exact question.
Does he pay the price for this collapse?
Looking back at the whole season, did the Twins actually have an MVP? And the answer to that, I think, is no, which means Rocco did a pretty good job except for the last month. Not even that.
It's interesting you say that because, we do the quarterly awards, and I thought, well, we could wait till next week when the season's officially over, and I think we will. But there was part of me as I thought about this and said, I'm so frustrated, I don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah.
The biggest disappointment, let's just put the roster in.
Yeah. So the question is this. All season long, they've had injuries, and Rocco at the helm had them on pace to win 90-plus games. The last 3 weeks with Rocco on the helm, they had as big a collapse as we've seen since the Phillies way back in the 50s, where they had to lose almost every game not to make the playoffs, and guess what? We lost almost every game we didn't make the playoffs.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
And so is that on Rocco? Carlos Correa kind of made it sound like it was on Rocco, but
well, and I think some of it was because it's one thing to have injuries and one thing to have a roster that's held together literally with Band-Aids. And there were times when they were in prime playoff position that Rocco deserved the tip of the cap. But you look at this past, not even month, you look at the past 2 weeks of saying, okay, you were still in it until last night. You were playing poorly and it didn't look good, but you were still in it. When guys don't look like they care, I don't know if they quit because they're just tired of it or if they quit on him, or maybe they're just not that good. But if it's all of the above, that means quitting on Rocco is part of it. Then this is a big problem.
The stat that I found most interesting, and it was one I heard the other day, it's not Rocco's fault that Margot was 0 for 30 as a pinch hitter.
But it's Rocco's fault that he got 30 opportunities.
It's Rocco's fault he got 30 opportunities. And so indeed, in a nutshell, that's the question. Is it Rocco's issue? Or is it the player's issue? And if it's Rocco's issue, somebody's going to pay the price. It's going to be him.
Well, and if Rocco's way of trying to stick it to the front office for lack of resources is doing some of the things that he did, I get it because you can't take to a microphone and do it, but your team and your fans are paying the price.
Yeah.
Because the amount of opportunities that Caleb Thielbar got was absurd, but they had no other lefty options in the bullpen. The Jorge Polanco trade turned out to be literally for nothing. Except for Justin Topa got to play in 2 games so far.
And we don't know about the kid in the minor leagues. He didn't do anything for the majors.
Right. So that's on whoever the talent evaluator is. That's whoever's the Ryan Grigson for the Twins has some answering to do. But the fact that, analytics is one thing. We can have that discussion of, well, Rocco doesn't manage. He just looks at a spreadsheet and does it accordingly. There is some of that. But there is, boy, does he get married to guys.
The Manny Margot stuff is anti-analytics.
And other times it works. I mean, he gets married to guys and it works. I mean, Carlos Santana, his season started awful.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden figured out to hit the ball a little bit. Up until the last 2 weeks, you said to the Twins have an MVP. I was ready to give it to Carlos Santana.
Yeah.
Led the team in home runs, Gold Glove first base. And then all of a sudden in every clutch moment down the stretch, but so did everybody.
Knucklehead.
He forgot how to hit and definitely forgot how to run the bases.
I think Rocco pays the price for this one. Honestly, I'd still give Rocco a B, but somebody's head is going to roll, and you can't cut the owner, right? You know how I feel about what the Pohlads did this year.
Right.
And that's
unacceptable.
Yeah,
they're an embarrassment.
More than that. This and again, from the day the playoffs ended last year to today, might be the worst run franchise I've seen as a human being for 1 year.
The biggest minus I have for Rocco, I don't think you can fix because he's a very calculated person when he speaks. And again, when you've got microphones in front of you, maybe you have to be. But there seems to be an overall lack of emotion. And I understand that there's 162 games. So most of the time you got to say, hey, we can't blow up like we just lost every opportunity in the book when we got 50 more of these. But again, we don't know what happens when the microphones are off and the doors are closed. But as much as we thought the Twins didn't care, hearing Rocco, I almost felt like at times he didn't either.
Agreed. 100, and I think that's what Correa was saying at the end of the year. We have no, energy. The kids don't seem to be checked in, and that's on the manager.
Well, and Rocco was a guy who in his playing career was hurt a lot. Yep. Obviously, the career ended quickly because of some injuries he couldn't overcome. Based on that, I don't know how much of a say he has in this. But the Twins will say, well, we had guys on the shelf for too long. Does Rocco coddle to that? Is that a huge minus?
Probably.
You got to be 100% or I'm not going to have you at all. And he's not going to have anybody playing at 98%. You got to be 100.
Well, and can this question be asked? And I think it's fair now. And I like Correa, right? but is Correa taking in the Twins what Ryan Suter was in the Wild, and that is the assistant GM play shortstop, right? So how much say does Rocco have on some of this? Does Correa carry more weight than Rocco?
Well, and there's still the biggest decision is when to or when not to lift your pitcher, because one of the turning points in the season was Bailey Ober entirely cruising in Kansas City and getting lifted despite retiring 15 in a row and Jackson Duran coming in and blowing the game. Now, it's hindsight 2020 on all of that. When you bring in relievers, no matter who they are, and they blow it, it was the worst decision ever. If you bring in relievers and it's 6 up, 6 down and you win, that's kind of how the script is supposed to go. And then there are times where somebody's getting hit and you're like, get rid of them. And Rocco says, well, let's give him a chance to get that third out. And he gives up 4 singles before he gets that third out. There's the Midas touch, and there seems to be the Rocco Baldelli touch in this department. Everything Rocco touches in that regard tends to turn to bleep, if you know what I mean.
Well, and going back to the very first conversation we had back in preseason, spring training, what are you doing with Louis Varland? Like,
it should be 7th or 8th inning, end of discussion.
And it should have been that before the season started. Like now, I think now it will be forever. But there's no way they should have put a guy whose career ERA as a starter is like 5 and said, you know what, the guy that threw the absolute nails in the bullpen, we're going to trot him back out as a 5 ERA starter.
Well, and
That's
speaking
Liam
of
Hendricks
trotting guys out of the bullpen that you go, why are we going here? I still would like to know, despite individual starts and how they're managed, how the bullpen management goes in general, because guys are down today is something that you get really tired of hearing. Well, you know, Jax went the last 2 days, and I understand you don't want his arm to blow up, but because of that, now we got to hand the 8th inning to Cole Sands, and it isn't going to go very well. Or last night, when the season was hanging by a thread, you put Cody Funderburk out there, and you just let him die.
And a guy named Blewett, which is so appropriate.
In a weird way, pitched well, except for this past series.
Yep.
So, to me, just the bullpen management, whether it's when to use them or who to use, that was awful. So, I don't know about Rocco anymore, but I'm so hesitant to speak on job status because I was the guy who said Paul Molitor's in no danger, and he was fired in a week. And Lavelle Neal, happy birthday to him today, by the way. He and I both said Molitor's fine, and a week later we were wrong. And talk about getting attacked on Twitter. I was just happy to be in the same ilk as Lavelle Neal, but they told us how stupid we were, so I'm not commenting on this one.
I feel bad for Rocco because, again, somebody's head's going to roll, and it's going to be his.
It's got to be somebody, and selling the team mathematically just isn't going to happen anytime soon. The Twins have got to make a lot of changes, and some of them eventually have got to be for the good. We got to make a change. We got to get to Dave Hoops. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, you left a coach out. We did. We didn't talk Chris Finch. Why? He's going to come up for most of the second hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. Back here on the Northland Sports page, Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook. The future's so bright, I got to wear shades. Or in some cases, when you're at a funeral and you don't want to be seen as overly emotional, people wear shades. That might be Twins fans right now.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Twins fans, true Twins fans, are looking at this and saying, what happened?
An absolute epic collapse. We were grading coaches in segment 1. I would probably give Rocco a C+ in the current state of things, but we've got A+ sponsors.
Absolutely. And again, let's start with the OG, Arola Architecture Studio. The Blackwoods Group, including their locations on London Road, Tavern on the Hill, in Two Harbors and in Proctor. Ferguson Bath and Kitchen, Mount Royal Bottle Shop, Krause Heating and Cooling, your carrier, HVAC authorized dealer. Assisted Living Locators, that's www.assistedlivinglocators.org/Duluth. Mike Regan at Christensen Group Insurance, Kohler Hyundai and Kohler Toyota, Advantage Emblem and Screen Printing, Comfort Systems of Duluth, Stewart's Bike Sports and Trophies, ABS Auto Solutions, and of course our next guest, Hoops Brewing.
Absolutely. Mr. Dave Hoops is on the phone with us. Now, the bump-in music was Future So Bright, I Gotta Wear Shades. And the other choice I thought of, Dave Cook, was Mr. Brightside, because if anybody is going to give us the bright side of just about everything, whether it be team, life, weather, you name it, it is Dave Hoops. So I'll be interested to see what he thinks about the Twins' epic collapse, the biggest week so far this season for the Vikes, and did the Timberwolves' future get brighter last night or not?
That's the biggest week of the Timberwolves season so far.
It's the biggest week in Minnesota sports history in a while.
Yeah.
So we'll go right to him. Dave Hoops, good morning. Plenty to talk about. Sometimes this show writes itself. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Really good segment so far. Definitely have some thoughts on the Twins, but yeah.
Well, let's start there because everybody deserves a eulogy, and we'll do it in better detail when we talk to Nick Nelson of Twins Daily to start the 11 o'clock hour. But this collapse was teetering for a long time. Now, they were technically alive until the end of last night, but that's like saying that Brad Pitt and I are the same guy because we have the same initials. They really weren't alive at all. But when you watch the Twins, it just got very, very frustrating. And I know how pro Twins you and I are. Do you know how hard it is to get me to be disinterested in this team? But we were getting there.
Well, I understand all that. I didn't stop. I'm going to the game. I have a tradition of going to the last homestand, and I'll be there today. And that 4-game set with Cleveland, every one of those games, it's just you're holding on every single thing. I'm just not going to look at it like they gave up or they just maybe weren't good enough. I'm a bit sad, but other than that, I'm going to keep on rooting for them. I don't, the Polids is it's a dirty word I can't say on the FCC. So screw it. The players we have are the players we have. I think Rocco will probably be back. I don't know if you're right. I like a lot of your analogy or you guys breakdown on how he did. But now I'm actually looking a lot towards the playoffs, and Pitt will love this. But I'm just pulling for a Yankees-Dodgers World Series. Although I kind of like KC. I'm already focusing on all that stuff, like the Padres. But I said it. So let's see what happens.
So, Dave, I'm going to tell you real quick, Dave Cook, that is, because I'm going to segue off Dave Hoop's World Series pick there. The L.A.-New York one, MLB, TV executives, anybody's going to say, yeah, I'll champion that idea because the money will just roll in. I'm going to go with the anti that. I want Baltimore-San Diego as your World Series because MLB would go, I'm sorry, what?
Right. You know what's funny about this? You guys are both talking about the end of the thing, and then you talked about Brad Pitt. This is just like the movie Titanic. You guys are hanging on, and you're at the front of the boat as the boat's going down.
Okay, but here's my follow-up. What does Brad Pitt have to do with Titanic?
Wasn't that guy that was at the front? Who was that guy?
Not even a little bit.
Leo.
Oh, my gosh.
All right, so again, I think it's Dave Cook next to me. Maybe it's Steve Patosha. I'm not sure who's co-hosting today. But
it's prettier than I am.
But Dave Hoops, I agree with you. I don't necessarily think that Rocco is going to lose his job over this because it depends on who calls what shot. Because if Rocco has been just the puppet for this front office, the front office is going to want to keep that puppet. And they're not going to lose their job. The head that should roll should either be a Pohlad who can't sell the team, Falvey or Levine who have been invisible. If a head's got to roll, Dave Cook is right. It's probably going to be Rocco. I just don't think it is because the excuses are there. It depends on how much you validate them. Because if you really think your three superstars are Lewis, Correa, and Buxton in any order, they did only play 25 games. And for 4.5 months, this team was in the thick of it. But you don't play a month as badly as the Twins did and not see somebody pay a price.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I was just hanging on that last night because I had it in my mind. Okay, Kansas lost. I'm going to the game today. Okay, they're playing it. They have to beat Atlanta. So it could have gotten down to Sunday. And, that's how my mind works. Eternally optimistic is not painful for a loss. You just are a bit sad and you go forward, and I've got 20 other things I care about. So
I'm with you on that, and I was kind of the same way.
Yeah.
It's not over until it's absolutely over, and then, of course, last night fell apart, and it is absolutely over. But you mentioned 20 other things you could care about. Let's talk about one of them, that if not for Timberwolves making a massive trade, the Twins putting the nail in their proverbial coffin, all of the discussion this week should have been about an undefeated Minnesota Vikings team that's shocking everybody, visiting Lambeau to play a one-loss Green Bay Packer team. We should be beyond hyped about this. It's just in the order of stories kind of falling off a little bit, but come tomorrow, it's going to be very different.
Well, I agree and disagree. I think it's the biggest story this week in the NFL. I think it's the most important game, the most interesting story. I think it's going to be epic. I don't really think it matters if Love plays or not. Willis has been really good. I think this game is going to be won by Minnesota's D. I think Darnold will face some adversity. I think Jones is key, a touchdown there. Addison coming back helps, but I think this is a defensive win. I'm going to call that right now. We'll see.
I think it very well could be, and Brian Flores has that defense playing scary good right now. And speaking of scary, will that make Green Bay scared to play Jordan Love? Dave Cook, you said you think so.
I do. I think that Green Bay is nuts to play Jordan Love tomorrow. Let Willis, like Dave said, Willis has been okay. And I think that you let that go to, if they lose tomorrow, and it's Willis and Love comes back the next week and tears up the league, they'll be just fine. But if he comes in tomorrow and, he's not 100%, he's not going to move around as good, and you've got a defense that's coming like the Vikings do, Like, he could get hurt again, and I wouldn't risk that. This is like if you ask me if Hawkinson is going to play in London because he's eligible. No, give him another week because you don't have to. Green Bay, this game isn't going to matter one way or another on their season. If Willis is the quarterback and they get beat, they're going to say, Love wasn't there. If Love plays and Van Ginkel gets around a corner and drills a guy who's not 100%, man, you wasted him on the fourth game of the season.
Well, and how much of it goes into that piece? Because if you believe in tiebreakers and you watch the standings like a hawk, the winner of this game is in first place. If it's the Vikings, it's by 2 games over Green Bay anyway, pending what Detroit does. If Green Bay wins, they hold an early tiebreaker over the Vikings. Both teams are 3-1. Do you care? There's 3 months of this left.
I care. The Vikings are going to lose, but not on my watch. We're just going to continue pulling for them, and when you pick them every week, you're going to be right sometimes. And these tiebreakers matter. I mean, look at the Twins. They could have just backed their way in just ridiculously just by winning the season series. So, yeah, division games, win them all, period. But Dave's right. It doesn't really matter for either team massively who loses, but the Vikings keep winning, then this huge story the rest of the country wants to talk about, and that's entertaining as well.
I absolutely agree with Dave Cook on the Hawkinson piece. I don't play him in London, but my reasoning is different. If you're just coming off an injury and it's of the lower body variety, I'm not even making him sit on a plane for the entirety of a flight that is going to London. I think you risk things tightening up, and maybe that's overthinking it a little bit, but I would wait until after the bye week for TJ Hawkinson to be part of this team. But the fun thing about Minnesota sports, and again, the show kind of wrote itself over the last 24 to 36 hours, all of it is a little bit polarizing. How do you feel about the Vikings going to Lambeau? How do you feel about the Karl-Anthony Towns trade? How do you feel about the Twins in general? One of those we haven't touched on yet. Your thoughts on the polarizing figure of Karl-Anthony Towns no longer being a Minnesota Timberwolf?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm thrilled about this. But Dave he just nailed it. He never complained. He played here. He's a fan favorite for that reason. Yeah, he had some real serious warts. But the real truth of the matter is we couldn't afford him. He's getting a bit older. I think right away our bench is arguably the best in the league. DiVincenzo, am I saying that right?
Dante DiVincenzo, yes. He's huge in this deal.
You're right. And then, that pick ends up being trade bait later. And I'm a Kentucky guy, so we lost a Kentucky guy.
And you gained one, yep.
Coming back. Yep. And if Randall is back 100%, I think this team just got stronger. I think we have cap space to burn. I love this trade, personally.
I do, too. I'm a big Dante DiVincenzo guy in general, and I think the Timberwolves have been for a while. They went after him last year and just didn't get him. Julius Randle is potentially a great player, but there's a big word in that phrase, and it's potentially. If it's coming back from injury at 100%, I love this trade. If it's coming back at 80 to 85%, there's a fundamental difference between Chris Finch and Rocco Baldelli. You'll see Julius Randle on the floor at 85%.
I worry about this. So first of all, on the Cat thing, they should have one of those video boards. Welcome back when the Knicks come.
Yeah, they will.
I know you guys are excited about the trade, but the draft pick is top 13 protected, top 11 protected by a team that's not any good. This literally could be Randall, DiVincenzo, and a second round pick in 2027.
But at the same time, we have to think about what the trade market was like. And I don't think it was a big secret, although this deal remained a secret till it happened. Overall, I don't think it was a huge secret that at some point, because Dave Cook himself had said it for almost a year, that Karl-Anthony Towns financially was going to have to be gone. So if you look the Timberwolves square in the eye and say, you have 2 beyond formidable NBA players and a pick coming back for Towns, a guy that you've pondered getting rid of forever, would you take it? I think the answer is yes. What I'm laughing at, this is so Minnesota, and this is so every sports fan thinks they know more than everybody else. This is so, we got to trade this guy. Well, not like that. You can't do that on every deal that's made.
So here's the thing. One, trust. Tim Conley has earned our trust, right? Everything he's done has turned out pretty well. Secondly, and I'll ask Rick about this, this is a typical Timberwolves trade where we have an ace and we'd like 2 of your jacks. And so you got rid of the best player in this trade went from Minnesota someplace, and we got back 2 guys that are good, right, but not at that level.
But what I also think it's going to be is it's going to be a Minnesota Timberwolves trade that maybe for a month, because let's face it, they made this with the season very much on the horizon.
Tomorrow.
Maybe for a month won't
Monday.
look very good. And all the media pundits will say, what in the world were we doing? And Herschel Walker this and Herschel Walker that. And then whether it's 2 months later or 1 year later,
I agree with
we're
you.
all going to go, oh, that's what we were doing.
Yep, I agree
So
with you.
in Tim Connolly, I absolutely trust. And Dave Hoops, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I was smirking at Dave Cook when you were talking, because when you brought up the bench, I spent the car ride here listing off, don't forget they have this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy now. And Dave kind of went, oh, yeah, that's right. This is a very deep team. So it's exciting. Here's the thing, Dave Hoops, with all this polarization, judge me accordingly, it all drives me to drink. Like I was telling Chad Greenway last week, I either hoist a beverage in celebration or deal with the anxiety of watching these teams. So no better place to get my beverage than your place. Let's talk about what's going on at the brewery.
I just want to say one other super quick thing. They gave him a place he wants to go. That was nice of them. Kind of a payback, so
which could be comical, because I think Cat and Tibbs 2.0 might generate some laughs as well.
Sure. Sorry. So the brewery, it's very exciting. Next Saturday we have Oktoberfest, and I really want to highlight the beer we're pouring right now. I just wrote an article in the paper for next week about fall beers, and Oktoberfest is the number one fall beer there is, and ours, I quite like it. Monday we'll have our Apple Ale on, which is always, a yearly special. We go to Bayfield, we get the fresh press, we throw it on tap, and it's another harvest beer that I'm quite proud of. I think everybody should try. And then we have the entire series of events during the week, of course, which you guys all know and we talk about a lot. Although last week we had the last outdoor vinyl night on Thursdays. Kind of sad. This will be the last week of the outdoor festivities, and then after Oktoberfest, we'll shut down the beer garden. So get out here while the weather's good. Come on down and see us, and of course, we'll have every game on. And tonight, that Atlanta-Georgia game, that should be really good. I'm excited about that, too.
Always exciting times at the brewery. No question that there's good reason to go each and every day. But no question is not the way we describe this segment. It thrives on your questions, Dave Cook.
Absolutely, and we're going to be quick today, Brian. We're we're on a little bit out of time. So I'm going to ask the easiest question maybe I've asked in a while, but it is going to be a choice. All right, when you're playing rock, paper, scissors, which is the best one? Rock, paper, or scissors?
It's hard to say what the best one is. I know what my go-to is, but Dave Hoops, I'll go to you first.
My go-to is rock, so I'm going to say rock.
Mine too. You know how the song goes. Can't stop the rock.
Very nice, gentlemen. All right, so the other question is one that I thought up in the car ride, because we had talked a little bit about, is this the first step of a trade that'll get Kevin Durant here, right? So here's my question. There's a couple of old superstars in the NBA, and I want you to tell me who's the best, who's got most left in the tank, who's maybe the most impactful, however you want to rank this. But the four older guys are Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, James Harden.
Ooh.
Well, without your list, I would have just said Steph, and then I'll stay Steph again, and I'll keep saying Steph. How about
Nice.
that? We'll just stop there. Yeah.
I think that's a good answer in an interesting way, because Steph Curry still does what he does at a very high level. But what he does, as good as it is pretty one-dimensional.
It's also changed.
As long as he can bomb, he's a viable option. Ask Team USA how good it was. LeBron, I think, is slipping a little, but he's still the most versatile NBA player I've ever watched. Not the best. MJ still got that, but most versatile is probably still LeBron. But the other thing in terms of versatility, and it seems like overall fitness and not as much the load management play, it might be Kevin Durant. I don't give a rat's about James Harden.
James Harden had quite a comeback last year.
Great beard, that's it.
I kind of agree with you guys, except I might lean LeBron. Thing about LeBron is the NBA gives him so much assistance. Let's just call it assistance.
Right.
That it's probably Curry.
Face of the league is going to get that.
Yeah, if Durant played more over the years, that would be the one scary thing about picking him up is he's going to play 15 games this year and then be ready for the playoffs. But so I go Durant, probably 2 because he has to do it his way. So it's Curry, Durant, James, and Harden.
Speaking of 15 games, we hope the Vikings have at least that many left, because do the math. That would mean they're in the playoffs at some point. Let's close the segment with Dave Hoops giving his always optimistic pick for Vikings-Packers. Who wins by how much?
I will. Oh, sorry about butchering the Alabama-Georgia game. I apologize. You should have picked on me for that.
We just thought you were having fun. Atlanta is in Georgia, so I didn't say anything.
Right. 27-24 Vikes. And we're going to get a turnover, a pick six, something, a score on a defensive turnover. Here we go.
The only issue I have with that score is who's scoring 24 on this Brian Flores defense?
Very nice. That's a good question.
So we'll see if the Purple can get it done. It sure has been a heck of a first 3 weeks. If the Vikes can make it 4, I think you're really onto something, because I know they said this on the mothership this week, but you'd be out of excuses for them. Yeah, but the Giants, that got put to rest when the 49ers came here and got beat. Yeah, but McCaffrey didn't play. Okay, but he's out for a while. The Texans are pretty good. We took care of that. You win at Lambeau, they got to start giving you some credit.
The issue, Bri, is that Josh Jacobs is a bigger running back. Can he make sure the Vikings stay in heavy package?
We'll find out. No Ivan Pace again, but the pace of the Vikings has been turbo to start the season. Speaking of pace, you always bring good pace to the show. Dave Hoops, we love you. We appreciate you. Let's do it again in a week.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the day. Go Twins. Let's win it out.
Might as well finish strong. Dave Hoops always with a strong finish to his segment. We finish the hour with buy or sell when we come back. We are the Northland Sports Page. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, stick around. We know a good buy here on the Northland Sports Page. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook. It is time to play buy or sell. Dave, we both like that song by John Michael Montgomery, but he very much goes fast getting those lyrics out.
Yep, he certainly does.
The reason I bring that up is because we're going to do the same thing, playing buy or sell. We're a little pressed for time, so we're going to go a little quicker today with this, but here's how the game works. I'm going to give a statement for 4 major sports leagues, and I say 4 because we're going to switch one of them today. Instead of NBA, we're going to go WNBA.
Good.
But MLB, NFL, NHL will be in there as well.
Okay.
If you agree with said statement, you can stop responding to each one I make.
But I'm doing it fast.
You can say buy, and if you disagree, you can say sell. And for each one, you're going to tell me why. So in addition to your hot takes, your responsibility is to determine the order. And again, little curveball today. NBA will be WNBA instead.
Well, when you're at Bat Joe, I like to see the curveball first. Let's go WNBA.
All right, so WNBA. Buy or sell this. We mentioned at the outset the Minnesota Lynx are well on their way to what hopefully could be another not only great but championship season. Buy or sell that if it is, this is Cheryl Reeves' best work yet.
Buy, because the other teams were 5 Hall of Famers. I'm not sure this one has that. That being said, if she gets there, my biggest question is this her last one? Because you go out on top now.
I'm going to buy as well, and I'm actually going to buy for the series they just got through. Now, mind you, if they don't win this championship, they're not seeded as the favorite or anything. If they get bumped out, it's not going to be jaw-dropping. What do you mean they lost? But usually when you grab a 2 seed, like the Minnesota Lynx did, you don't want to say you're going to cakewalk through the first round, but you might. And they did in terms of sweeping it, but they had to grind out these victories. But look at who they played. You talk about Hall of Famers with great resumes and how much that helps in a postseason. You just took care of a team that had Brittany Griner and Diana Taurasi. For those that are new and joining WNBA following it all, and all you know is Caitlin Clark, and if that's all you know, please shut up. But at the same time, if you look at legends of the game, you just dispatched of 2 of them.
Yeah, that in the starting 5 of all time, one of those 2 is in it. Pick your poison.
Right. So I do think it'll be her best work yet, and I think it'll be the work that she can hang her hat on, because we all knew Nafisa Collier was good. I don't think we knew this good.
Right, exactly.
I mean, you look at the offensive skills, and then, by the way, the WNBA announced their Defensive Player of the Year. It was her.
Yeah, that surprised me.
You know what I mean?
Surprised me. But no, this is Cheryl Reeve best stuff. I agree. Okay, let's go to the NHL.
All right, so the NHL preseason games are happening, and the scores look like pond hockey games. And if you like that style, this is fun. If you don't, you're cringing. That's not really the question here, but buy or sell that you expect some of this to carry over and scoring will be up in the NHL this year.
I don't ever expect stuff from the preseason to carry over from a macro point of view. I think that some of the stuff that we're seeing from individual players could carry across, like the Russian kid last night, and I'm not even going to pretend you corrected me before the show. I'm not going to do it now. But his play on special teams last night was a blum, right? I mean, it was beautiful. And so that can carry across, and that'll help scoring, but 8-7s aren't going to happen. The goaltending is too good.
No question about that. I kind of miss the days where you would try the pronunciation anyway, but I'm going to sell that scoring is going to be up as well, and here's why. I look at it kind of like...
Ustendinov.
There you go. I look at it kind of like I look at the NFL preseason, where nobody's really playing, and in hockey it's a little bit different, where it's not the personnel that's not playing that you're not going to see, but you're not seeing the physical aspect of the game itself. I've seen one decent hit, and it was because the Wild put it on Twitter because it was Dumba throwing his weight around against the Wild. Nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to ruin their season already. Looking at you, Matt Boldy. So we're not seeing the physical play, and I think once you see that, scoring should come back to earth. And the other thing I think you're going to see is when the physical toll starts to be taken on some of these offensive weapons who haven't dealt with it, you look at that like you look at the NFL.
Fency says that.
You're not conditioned to be ready, and it's just going to be different.
Yep, Fency says that all the time.
So actually, even though the goaltender's main job is to stop scoring, the goaltender might be the third factor to me. The goaltending is good, but is it going to have to be right away?
Yeah, it's this. You can take bits out of this. Liam Ogren is playing himself into an NHL player because he's physical.
Right.
And he's the reason that if Boldy misses some time, at least we have a guy who can play on a second line.
I should have spun it. Buy or sell that you prefer it be up. Would you like to watch more of these 8-5s versus 2-1?
Yes. I think this is
I would
fun.
too.
So, all right, let's move along. Let's go to the National Basket. No, we did that, didn't we?
We did.
Let's go to the Major League Baseballs.
All right, so Major League Baseball, we're going to talk a lot about the Twins with Nick Nelson of Twins Daily in about 5 minutes and officially eulogize the Twins, and then I want to distance myself from it because most of you already have the way the last month went. But with the Minnesota Twins, there's been a ton of talk with the Correa time missed. Buxton, water is wet, missing time due to injury.
His longest season.
Royce Lewis missing time due to injury. Not a lot was said about one injury that I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag. I buy that this was very much undersold to bring both elements into play. Buy or sell that you think the biggest injury problem the Twins had was Joe Ryan going down?
I'm going to sell, and I'm going to sell because they got enough from the kids' pitchers that kept them in this, right? And so losing Correa is so big for that team. Like, losing Correa is gigantic. So I'm not saying Ryan isn't, like, key, and losing him was difficult, but Richardson was good. Festa was good enough to keep them on a 90-92. Well, he was a 90-92 win season. The mismanagement of the staff probably got worse when Ryan was gone, and so I'm not going to give it number one because I believe it's Correa with a bullet, but it's probably number two, and it's not just him; it's the ripples.
So I'm going to buy because of the ripple effect, because I do think that when you've got a 5-man rotation and one goes down, everybody's got to move.
Your number two goes down,
and then
not just a player.
I just said one of the 5 in the rotation, and really if you add Paddock, you had 2 down. I get what you're saying about Zebby and about Festa and about SWR and all that, and it might be a situation where you go, in a weird way that Joe Ryan injury helped if it's 2-3 years down the road and those guys become studs. But if you look at this year alone, they gave you some bright spots, but they didn't give you enough. Mm-hmm. It was, are they going to give you the 5 and fly and give up 1 run or 0 runs? Because another, blemish with Rocco is he's not going to let him go more than 5 or fly or the third time through the order or whatever the case may be. Or is it going to be like Zebby had against Toronto and it's 8-0 and we have 1 out? And when you look at when the Twins fell apart, we could have said that some people said, well, I said this was unsustainable in May or June. Congratulations. But it really wasn't unsustainable until September. So when you're in the biggest games on your schedule and you've got to throw Zebby, Festa, or SWR, and you're just begging to win the Pablo and Obra games and throwing your hands up going, I don't know what will happen with the rest of them. Joe Ryan isn't Cy Young, but he's a lot closer to it than any of the other 3 names we just mentioned. The Joe Ryan injury might be huge for 2027. It hurt bad in 2024.
Yeah, no, it definitely hurt bad. The problem is it's not the most important one. That was the question.
It still is Correa, I think, but at the same time, they were a lot more used to playing somebody else at shortstop because of the history, and they got through it. Correa is their leader for sure. You weren't used to any of the guys you threw on the mound suddenly every 5 days.
Wasn't Correa like hitting 308 with power?
Correct.
Like we missed.
But Correa being hurt for a big chunk had become kind of an annual tradition.
Yeah.
No wonder he and Buck hang out.
No doubt, right? All right, let's finish up with the National Football League.
All right, so this week in the National Football League, and for the second consecutive week, there are 2 Monday night games. Why? I don't know. Buy or sell that you like double headers on Monday nights.
Sell.
Me
Easy.
too.
Because I don't watch the first part of the first game because I don't know it's there. And I don't watch the second part of the second game because it's too late. So you know what I watch, Brian? I watch one game. I watch
You watch something on Netflix that I've never heard of.
No, I don't, because that's not my thing. But I watch the second half of the first game and the first half of the second game. So really, in essence, I only spend 1 game worth of time on this.
All right.
So it's dumb.
So I'm going to sell as well, and I agree with you that it's dumb, but my reasoning is going to be a little less individualized or personalized. Mine's going to be, I just missed the prestige of Monday Night Football. You were the game. I also missed the fact that it was just on ABC and everybody saw it, but that's get off my lawn type stuff. But Monday night was the event. It was a big deal. It was, you got that announcing crew. You were basically the game of the week. You got to play on Monday night. That was, even though it wasn't on NBC, it was must-see TV, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Now I don't understand the rhyme or reason. I didn't mind it when they did it for the opening weekend, because opening weekend of the NFL season, everybody who likes football is glued. Yep. So if you want to play 2 on Monday night, be my guest. But now you're playing 2 on random weekends in September for what reason? And why is Thursday night getting the only exclusive 1 game on our night when that's on a streaming service and usually the garbage game of the week?
I was going to say Thursday night is by itself.
It's the undercard trash. Here's NFL football. Can't wait till the weekend when the real teams play.
Yep, that's 100% agree.
So
with
it's just goofy to me that Monday Night Football used to be the biggest deal around, and now you get to Monday, and granted, a lot of us go to work first, and unless you're avidly playing fantasy football, which don't get me wrong, I do. Sometimes you're going, oh yeah, who plays Monday night this week? And now you got 4 teams doing it. Who cares?
Yeah, no, I think it does take a lot of the prestige out.
But you know why they do it? It's for the love of money.
Amen.
The NFL has plenty, but any way they can get more, they're going to do it. The Twins need a lot more next season, because that's the goal right now, because this season is done. We are halfway through the show, Dave Cook. You know what? It's my half birthday today.
Happy half birthday.
Thank you. Do you think I should take the second half of the show off?
I think we should either call it your birth or your
my day.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this. I won't take the second half of the show off, because taking second halves off, that's what the Minnesota Twins did. We'll talk about them when we come back. We'll be right back.